Hey everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, February 15th of 2026. I have a lot of great journaling thoughts to share with you today, and I'm just going to jump right in. So the first thing I wrote at the beginning of the week is that everything is connected. I just kind of sat with that for a second. Sometimes when you sit in a really quiet, peaceful, maybe really clean environment, which that does it for me, especially when I'm journaling, uh, and you get still and you just listen, you realize everything is connected. And then I wrote, stay kind for yourself. And I actually only wrote that one thing, everything is connected, in the very first day I was journaling. And I just sat with that for a little bit. And then I closed my journal and I went about my day. And then the next day, what kept coming in for me is stay kind for yourself, because we think about being kind, compassionate, empathetic, because it does benefit other people, the people in our lives, our family, our friends, the people we work with and interact with. No matter where you are, staying kind, you do that for them, but you mostly do it for yourself, because when you lose that piece of yourself, you forget that everything is connected, right? And then I wrote this, keep your heart open. That just felt like, okay, no matter what happens in this world, um, I need to keep my heart open. And no matter what I feel is happening, not just in the world, but to me, for me, it's easy to kind of close yourself off a little bit. And I think it's really, really important to keep your heart open. So then some other random thoughts that I just thought I would share. So I've upped my fitness game this week. Okay. I've realized that I need the actual physical strength and challenge. It's amazing how fast you fall off the wagon after life things happen. 3.5 years ago, which I can't believe it's been that long, but I had a full knee replacement. I had a horrible water ski accident like almost 30 years ago, and I messed up my leg. And for 25 years, I did all kinds of treatments. I did tons of natural things. I did stem cells, I did PRP, I did chiropractic, I did acupuncture, I did so many things. And then it accumulated, thankfully, beautifully, into this amazing knee surgery. But what happened is some of the things that I used to challenge myself with in physical fitness, they got paused, because that tends to happen when we have something big like that then we need to gain all of our strength back, and we have all the rehab and all the stuff. So last week when I talked about moving energy and the importance of it, I realized I need to get back to challenging my fitness. I need to up my fitness game. So one of the things that I used to do all the time, there were two things, and I only did one this week, but one were wall handstands, where I would go up into a handstand against a wall and just, maybe do teeny tiny little wall stand push-ups, but just for the pure strength of it, for the core, for my upper body. And there's something really empowering in doing something like that. And when I first did it this week, I was nervous because I had not done it for so long. And I said, okay, if you're not gonna do it now, you're not gonna do it. So I made myself get up into a wall handstand. It's a touch bit shaky at first, but then because I lift weights on a regular basis, and I knew I was strong enough and I wouldn't hurt myself or break anything, because this is not something you want to just try to do out of the blue. But this was just a good example. Now, the second thing is cartwheels. And I've loved doing cartwheels. I was always proud that I could always do cartwheels all through my 30s, 40s, 50s. And then when I had my knee done, I stopped doing cartwheels because, of course, you can't do a cartwheel. And so that is next on my list. So it's amazing how fast you fall off the wagon. After life, things happen. So in my state of peace, still disrupted many times, I'm craving physical and in-person connection even more. That's what I really find. And what's interesting is when you start to move energy strategically and on purpose, then you start to go, okay, what am I open for? And I am open, I've discovered, for more physical connection, more creativity. And on Friday, I was lucky enough, I got an impromptu day with my niece, my 14-year-old niece. And in the after we went to lunch, we spent some time in the morning, we went to lunch, and then we painted. some of my acrylic pouring I had not done forever. Um, I said, hey, let's paint. So we spent the afternoon and we each did 3 small paintings, and it was so much fun. And just the connectivity, we chatted, we talked, there was no distractions from technology or social media. And this is exactly what I was craving. So it was absolutely beautiful. And then what happened actually on Thursday, I believe it was released on Thursday. There's a man on, it's got a big platform on mostly YouTube, but I think he's around everywhere. His name is Chase Hughes, and he dropped a beautiful 40-minute, 5 universal truths from all the ancient texts that really, really resonated with me. So I wrote them down. I thought I would share, and then one in particular stuck out to me. So I expanded on that uh, one thing because it really landed with me so perfectly. So this is from Chase Hughes. I'm going to put a link to that video below this video so that you, if you feel so inclined, you can tune in. I would really suggest that you watch or listen to this when you're not distracted, because it is so beautifully put together, and I think you will really, really love it. It will lift you up. It will make you realize and remember. I mean, it's so beautifully done. So the first thing, and this all came from Chase Hughes. We are not separate. You never were. We never were, and we never could be. Separation is an illusion. Okay, that was number one. Number two is that fear is the greatest lie ever told, and love is the only truth. I love that because we feel that in our bones, right? Your mind is not a camera, it is a projector. And then number four is the enemy is not the world, the enemy is the ego. Good, right? And then number five is that everything is connected, which is so wild that I wrote that because, or that he said that because at the very beginning of the week, that's what came through to me. Those exact same 3 words. Everything is connected. So great. And then we just forgot who we were. And then he just expanded a little bit of it with this. Waking up begins with the truth. It requires presence. It requires compassion and service. It requires stillness and self-knowledge. It transforms suffering into wisdom. It is just remembering what we are. And it's just a recognition of that. So then I actually ended up watching this little video of his a couple times. And I just thought, wow, this is so beautiful. But what really, really stuck out to me is, I believe it was number 3. Your mind is not a camera, it's a projector. So I thought, okay, this gives me something really fun to journal on this week. And because it was yesterday that I wrote all of this down. So this is really amazing. Okay, so here's how I started this. If my mind is not a camera but a projector, how could I dial that in or tighten it up? Okay, and really practice it so that it's automatic. It feels like a radical thing to claim. It feels really radical to say my mind is a projector, but it's really not, right? We don't simply see the world, we actively construct it. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. And if you study quantum entanglement, the observation effect, the things that Dr. Thomas Campbell talks about, even David Icke talks about, you will know exactly what I'm saying when I say we construct our reality based on our perception and our projection, right? So here's a simple example. 2 people walk into the same meeting. One sees threat and one sees opportunity. The room didn't change, just the projection changed, right? Relationships can be the same. It's amazing how our mind fills in the gaps. It reminds me of one of the 4 agreements of that book of Don Miguel Ruiz, where he talks about don't make assumptions. And when our mind fills in the gaps, we're just assuming, we're just making assumptions. So if I feel positive and upbeat in any situation, that's what I'll get. So if I feel stressed, uncertain, or unworthy, right? That's how it always is. One person could walk into a party and feel stressed, unworthy, anxious, introverted, all of that. another person could walk into the same party and be excited, and you don't even have to be an extrovert to be that way. It your perception and your projection of what you see is everything. Okay, so you have to think about what I wrote here is the world is full of projections that are amplified. Okay, and the very first culprit of that is social media. Everything is amplified. So the algorithms learn what we react to and give us a tailored version of reality. This is why you must start to opt out for most of your day. Most of your day needs to not be sucked into that. Okay. With social media, I'm not really seeing the world. I'm seeing a world shaped around what I'm already projecting. Holy crap. Okay. This is exactly why we are so polarized. Right now. Each side of whatever, social, cultural, political, religious. This is why we're so polarized, because we're just sucked into these algorithms. The social media is feeding us. And it doesn't matter if it's um, any of the like short reel stuff like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, even or even the long stuff like YouTube and Rumble and all of those things. They're all projecting back to us. It's so crazy. So, reality, let's see, each side is polarized because of whatever reality they are projecting is absolutely convinced, and they are absolutely convinced they are simply seeing the truth or the facts. If I step back, I can fully see how crazy this truly is. All you have to do is just disconnect for a moment, take a step back, and go, whoa, this is crazy. This is crazy. And then you have to really think about what the news. So besides the social media where a lot of people get their news, the news, like alternative news, the mainstream news, it doesn't matter where you get your news, okay? Wherever you get it, the facts are filtered through the narratives, okay? So you can have a gathering of people and you could look at it through the filter of a protest, or you could look at it through the filter of a riot. And it depends on who's filming it, who's talking about it, who's giving you the facts. And you could also look at defense of democracy or threat to our democracy. How many times have you heard that? A million. And you're looking at exactly the same thing somebody said, something somebody didn't say. It's a projection, and you're basically picking up on someone else's projection, and it's on purpose. These narratives are on purpose. When we plug in to this narrative warfare, because that's what it is, our interpretation of a certain event or a storyline, it gets way ahead of perception. Okay, so think about that. Our interpretation of something gets way ahead of our perception. We're not designed for the amount of crap that comes our way. Okay, so, and I talk about that in just a second because it's so important. Now, the next thing I wrote here is that AI needs to be carefully navigated. All right, we don't know what was actually captured by a camera. Okay, we're in that place, and it's only going to get just a little bit more intensified as we move forward. Okay, we don't know what was actually captured by a camera or etc., or what was created. It makes me question everything, which is good and bad at the same time. But we are forced to shift because of this, right? We have to shift. We have to shift ourselves because of this. If the outside world can be faked or simulated, we are forced back into internal discernment. If everything outside of ourselves can be faked or simulated, then we are forced back into our own discernment. And discernment has been one of my most important words for the last few years because it's so important. We have to use discernment, and we give it away so quickly. So, like something that might feel congruent to us because it's our worldview already, we don't even take a minute to think about it. We just jump right aboard. So, discernment is very, very powerful. This makes the projector more powerful than the camera, okay? Because you can't trust your camera any longer, okay? Holy wow, this feels massive. Just knowing and acknowledging this and then utilizing it. Okay, we have to utilize our internal discernment. It's so super important. So then we need to think about what I wrote down here next was our identity or our ego. Okay, this one is huge and central to the whole camera versus projection idea. Okay, our identity and our ego. How I identify is a projection in itself. Okay, so think about this: who I think I am, what story do I tell the world, what experiences do I put through this lens? Okay, everyone has their experiences and they tell these experiences through their own lens. Okay, how does the world respond to my identity or ego projections? How does the world respond? I mean, this is a common part of our day and our life every single day and every single moment. Okay, and then you have to think about this piece because I've experienced, along with everyone else in the world, my moments of anxiety, like serious anxiety with what is happening in the world, okay? And it's become this anxiety now is normal. And it's normal because of the massive amount of information that comes our way. Our mind is simply not designed to see all the horrible things happening in real time, uh, all around the world. All we see, hear, or feel is a threat. Everything feels like a threat. And we're not designed to do that. We're designed to have anxiety when there is real local threat, when there's real local threat, not threat of what's happening around the world. And remember, we get all these media stations and all this stuff. And now with AI, they can project whatever they want at us. And we no longer use discernment. We're just in constant modern anxiety. And you wouldn't believe how many people I talk to who bring this up and who acknowledge that anxiety is just a part of their everyday life and it's destructive. So we're not designed, our biology, our mind, our consciousness, everything that makes us who we are, we're not designed for that. You know, we've been knowing this for a long time, okay? So there is a deeper implication to the mind as a projector. That's what I see it. So here's what I've discovered. I must participate in the projection. That is a deeper understanding. In order for that, what being projected at me, I must participate in it. Okay? You don't have to participate. You can opt out. Okay? It requires effort to be objective. So if I'm going to be objective about a situation, a relationship, anything that happens, I now am required to be objective. That is massive, okay? It is absolutely essential that I maintain my humility. I think this is a big piece of being objective. It's very, very difficult to admit when you're wrong about something. But once you start opening that lens and saying, maybe I was wrong about that, you can be objective. You can have humility. Humility is an amazing a piece of being human because it changes everything. It can change everything. So it is absolutely essential that I maintain humility. With the world so shattered and fragmented, humility might be our most important virtue. That's what I think, because it's so hard to admit when we're wrong. It gets easier when you do it because situations change, you grow, you have experiences, and you start to realize that it's a superpower to admit that maybe, maybe you were wrong. And it's okay. It's actually, that's part of the human experience from my perspective. So then I wrote this. From what I can see, viewing life or this world from the camera view, it leads to certainty. Okay. So if you're just looking out from a camera, you're just viewing life as everything you see is just certain. That's a fact. That's a certainty. That's a certainty. That's a fact. Okay. But when you view life from the projector view, it leads to responsibility, which again has been one of my favorite words the last few years because it is personal responsibility. So when you get to view the world through a projector and you get to create the reality you want to project and see, now you're taking responsibility, personal absolute beautiful responsibility. I think that's the way that feels very congruent to live for me. So here's what I think this boils down to. The modern crisis may not be that we disagree on the facts. Okay, so that might not be the modern, I wrote crisis in quotation marks. Okay, the modern crisis may not be that we disagree on facts. We are unaware of the movies we are projecting out into the world. That's where the crisis might be. That we're just simply unaware of what we're projecting. You know, that to me is like, wow. And I think that's why that truth that Chase Hughes talked about so resonated with me. And I think that I might kind of expand on the other ones in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because each one felt so profound and so beautiful that I thought, okay, this is a really cool thing to expand on. And then what I did is I came up with some journaling questions, because I'm going to journal on these myself this week. And they are very good. Okay, so number one is this: where in my life am I most convinced that I am just seeing the truth? Okay. Okay. And then I wrote this: certainty is often a clue. If you are absolutely certain, that's a clue. Okay. That you might not be seeing the truth, but this is a clue. If you are absolutely certain, you're just seeing the truth. And then, what belief feels so obvious to me that I've never examined it? That is that is a massive thing to ask yourself. What just seems so obvious that you've never examined it? Okay. What recurring story do I tell about other people? For example, this: people are selfish, authority can't be trusted, no one really understands me. These are all stories. We tell so many stories about ourselves, to the world, all of that, right? Where did that story originate, and who would I be without it? I think that's probably the most important part of that question. Who would I be without my story? You know, we're so afraid of losing ourselves and losing who we think we are, our identity, our ego. We're so afraid of losing that. And when you start to strip all that away, life becomes so much more beautiful and simple. And this is where humility gets to come in, right? So then this: when I feel hurt or angry, what meaning do I immediately assign to the event? Okay, when I get hurt, and I have experienced, because we all do, and I've experienced what I feel has been very deep, deep hurt, like all of us have. This is not a unique thing for me. Like, everyone experiences this in different things along the path of their life. Okay, what meaning do I immediately assign to this event? We immediately give it an assignment of what this means. It's almost ridiculous, right? And then in the same question, ask yourself this second part: what alternative explanations might exist that I don't naturally consider? You know, this one is super powerful. And I've heard of this before, and this is why it's in here, because I've implemented this. Because I immediately jump to a conclusion or jump to an explanation. I keep maintaining that hurt, and over and over and over. And I play it over in my mind, overthink about it. And I know most humans can totally relate to that. We overthink ad nauseum about things. So then this: what fear might be shaping how I interpret the world right now? You know, what's your biggest fear that's shaping how you interpret the world? This is a really important question to ask. Fear is one of the strongest projection lenses. Is is it fear of irrelevance, rejection, loss of control, or being wrong? The humility, this is where this comes in. And then this: if someone with the opposite political or social view watched my thoughts for a day, what would they say I'm projecting? Okay, so many of you have probably seen the telepathy tapes, where there's communication through telepathy. So if someone were actually able to see and participate in your thoughts, okay, someone with an opposite political or social view watched your thoughts for a day, what would they say I am projecting? Can I articulate their critique without caricaturizing it? So making a caricature out of it. Okay. Boy, that would be a wild thing to actually have your thoughts that most of the time we don't say these things because we live in a polite society. We don't want to hurt people's feelings, but we might have some really nasty projections going on in our mind, judgments and all of that. That's a really good place to kind of stop yourself and really think, if someone were watching my thoughts and they could read my thoughts as if I were saying them out loud, what would I be projecting? That's crazy. And then this, where do I confuse intensity of emotion with accuracy of perception? You just might be having a super intense emotional experience in a moment. You hear something, you read something, you see something, you interact with somebody, and it elicits like an intense emotional response. Okay. Strong feelings often feels like strong evidence, but they're not the same, right? Are they the same? I don't think they're the same. Strong feelings feel like, here's evidence. I feel this way, and could not be more true than where we are right now. People think, I feel this way, then this is true for everyone. And then that's a big question. And then this one, what identity do I protect the most fiercely? Okay. How does that identity filter what I notice, amplify, or dismiss? We all protect our identity. We protect our ego. We protect our stories. We protect our worldview. We protect. And I don't know if that's necessarily the smartest, kindest, most amazing way to walk through this life, because I think it stops us from participating with love and positivity. And, regardless of what's happening in the world, we can make a big difference. In what situations do I assume motive instead of observing behavior? Okay, that's big too. So this goes along with it. How often do I think I know why someone did something? This one actually can fracture relationships. It can fracture really important, especially relationships. How often do I know? How often do I think I know why someone did something? Making assumptions. We always jump out ahead and think, I know why that person did that. Did you talk to them? Did you ask them? Did you have a conversation? And it might be, maybe you were right. Maybe you were completely off. Maybe it's okay if you have different viewpoints, or someone did something you don't approve of, but they're coming from their own projections, their own everything, right? And then this, if my mind is a projector, what film has it been playing on repeat lately? Scarcity, betrayal, competition, catastrophe, redemption. What are you playing? And who wrote the script? Who wrote your script? Did you let someone else or something else or some narrative or social media influencer write your script? This can be true for so many people. And then this is the final question. What would it look like to relate to reality with more humility? I think this is a really important question. If I held the possibility that I'm projecting 20 to 30% of what I think I'm seeing, how would that change how I speak, decide, argue, or love? Okay? That's a really important question. So here's I'm going to end this. I think this is a really important, if you feel so inclined, to journal on this idea. If you want to deepen your practice this week, try this experiment. Okay, at the end of each day, write down these three things. One moment that you were certain, one moment that you were absolutely certain. Then number two, one moment you were reactive. And then number three, what moment you might have projected. These, you can just ask yourself this at the end of each day. And it will really make you stop, pause, and think for a second, okay? And then what you'll see, I think that's really important, is that over time, there will be patterns that will appear. If you even do this for 7 days, and I'm going to actually do this week. I'm going to journal on all these questions, and I'm going to ask myself those three things, okay? What moment were we certain? What moment were we reactive? And what moment might we have just simply projected? Okay, and then I think you'll notice patterns. I think I'll probably notice patterns too. All of us will. And then I wrote this to finish. I realize that the more clearly I see that I'm a projector, the more clearly I may begin to see the world differently. If I see this, I'm projecting. I get to project whatever I want. There is the whole law of attraction. If you're in an age where that you remember when that came out, I think it was probably 20 years ago. I don't know, 15 years ago. I remember it was like so many things just dropped right in, like, oh, law of attraction. Of course. We attract what we believe and what we see and what we put out. If you believe there's abundance and massive abundance for everyone, you know, in fact, one of the favorite things that I like to kind of spread a lot to my nieces and nephews and even my grandkids and uh, is the idea that money loves me. It flies at me. And I did this little practice. In fact, this is kind of interesting to share. So probably about 30 years ago, and I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard that one way to put out to the universe that you always have abundance is a simple exercise. And I shared this with my 14-year-old niece when I spent the day with her this last week. And I said, okay, what you want to do is you want to show the world that there's always abundance. So how you do this is you start with 10 $1 bills and you put them in a place in your purse, in your wallet, somewhere where you know where it is. Maybe, most of us carry things around with us, and it's super easy to add 10 $1 bills folded up into somewhere in your purse or wallet. And then over time, what you do is you start to replace those $1 bills with the next bill up, which is a $5 bill. And then you have 10 $5 bills. And then over time, you start to replace each of those with a $10 bill and then a $50 bill. And eventually, you replace each one of those $50 bills with a $100 bill. And so for about 30 years, this is something that is really an amazing exercise to do. So I started doing that. And it probably took me a couple of years to actually get 10 $100 bills. But then an interesting thing happened at the beginning of all of this, especially when I had those 10 100s, which was a lot and still is a lot of money. I knew it was there. It kind of burned a hole in my pocket, even before I got to the $100 bills when I had, you know, tens or 50s. Like, that's a lot of money. And I would be somewhere, I would see something, and I would make an impulse buy because I had the cash in my, and then what happened eventually is now it's just there, and it's emergency use, and it's also tells the universe that I am never broke. I always have money. I don't think you have to do it with that big of an amount if that doesn't fit what you do or your life, but you'd be surprised. And it took me a couple of years to actually build up to that. So that has always been something that I believe is a super easy thing to do, and maybe project the idea of abundance into the world, because I think that's something that many of us get stressed about is money, lack of money, paying our bills, taking care of our expenses, and that becomes this loop that we get caught in. I didn't really expect that to flow into that, but that just felt like an appropriate thing to share. So I would love to know what you think about this whole topic. And if you feel so inclined, watch the video of Chase Hughes. It was an absolutely beautiful remembering, realization, these truths that are woven in through all of these ancient texts through millennia. People who weren't connected, not just in time, but over centuries of, different knowledge has been placed in there. It's really, really beautiful. So thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. We are moving into the third week of February 2026. And if you follow things like the year of the fire horse, that starts this week. And, those are fun energies to take advantage of and maybe use this to maybe give you a jump start on viewing the world through a projection of your own creation rather than just a camera of what other people or other narratives or other things are trying to feed into your own story. So I think it's a really beautiful thought process. And I would love to know what you think about it. So thanks for tuning in today, guys, and we will see you next time.